a trophy.
Hello and welcome to another fine and, dare I say, a spooky edition.
Fright Night.
It's Fright Night here at Midlife Krisis. So, as we all know, Daddy loves props. And I've got a big old box of props today. Today's topic is about horror games. We're going to have to really emphasize that roar because this is one of the hardest words.
Second syllable.
It's really hard to say this word and not look like a prevert. So we're playing horror games.
You know those pornos?
Yeah, you need those pornos. You go into that Steam, you download those pornos. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I have this case, this box, this shopping tote, but rigid walls. And it is full, Uncle Bob. It's full of every horror game that I own. I think I didn't do like a full like fine-tooth comb job through the collection. I just did a cursory shelf peel.
Yeah.
But I've got stuff from the oldest stuff I have is in here goes to the Genesis. I've got some real antiquities in here, and I got a ton of the more modern stuff because really the horror genre, especially in America, didn't really take off until Resident Evil. Now there's stuff before that we'll get into. You're Alone in the Darks and what have you. Seventh Guest. We could talk about that, and we will. But yeah, this is my collection of horror games. I want to start by talking about just the genre in general.
Okay.
A little background on me. I'm a real sicky weirdo who loves. Yeah, we all know. I love my video nasties, which is not to be confused with pornos. Video nasties is a fun little United Kingdom term for all these movies that they used to ban all the time. They were real free and loose with the ban hammer over there when it came to movies. But
Oh boy, the British just have the best words that mean one thing in America and something very different.
yeah,
In
look
the
into
UK.
Fanny on that one. Fanny's a good one.
Right.
They're also real free and loose with that capital C word, which
Yeah.
I won't say here, but. Needless to say, it can cause for some confusing pieces of conversation. What did you call me? So I've been a horror movie fan, horror books, comics, everything. So for really as long as I can remember, like in going back to like elementary school age. And I think I'm certainly not unique in that when I grew up and when you grew up, but I think it affected us differently. Freddy Krueger was like a cartoon character for kids.
Yeah.
But he was a serial killer who murdered kids and was covered in burns.
Incredible how that happened.
He was everywhere. Like he had Nintendo games. He had all these toys. I owned so many Freddy Krueger toys growing up. I had the glove. I had this really cool, like, remember the LJN wrestling figures?
No, definitely.
I had like one of those, but a Freddy.
Yeah, the wrestling buddy.
Yeah. Oh man. And with Jason, the exact same thing. I had every kid had dressed up as Jason at least 4 Halloween.
Just incredible how two serial killers, one a child murderer, became such a part of the zeitgeist. And in 1980s conservative ass America, I mean, it was late 80s, but this is where there was the D&D.
Tipper was a fan. She was like, hell yeah, man, I love gore. Hell yeah. That's my last name, baby.
So this is during the moral panic of D&D and all that. And then, it's
Satanic
like...
panic with the schools and all that
and
shit.
it's like, oh, what do you want to be for Halloween? Oh, the child murderer, Freddy Krueger with the knives for hands. All right.
To me, though, it makes a little bit of sense. Like because all that stuff was obviously going on. And the D&D one is so funny. Like thinking about how D&D is dangerous for your kids is so funny to me.
The satanic cults.
It's so cool. It's like, no, they're just nerds. And this is what they have, and you're trying to take it away from them.
The one thing
they have, and you're trying to take it away from them because you're monsters. And you always will be monsters forever. Yeah. But it was. That's my gateway into the genre, and I had parents that, like a lot of 80s parents, 90s parents, we went to go rent stuff, and like my mom tried, like she would be like. Maybe not this one, but like she's really liberal when it came to like me renting horror movies. Every once in a while, like she would watch them with me. She was a kind of a fan too, not to my extent, but she liked that kind of stuff.
Wait, how old are you when this is going on?
I started renting Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street stuff in second grade, so I was like 8.
Oh man. What about the sex and the boob stuff?
So my mom would either put her hand in front of my eyes or ask that I do it, and then when it was up to me, it was always one of the, we got it, Mom. Don't worry, I'm making total sure that I don't see these sinful breasts. I promise.
Oh, what an effective technique.
Yeah.
My son's not being corrupted at all.
Not at all. One time, a real funny example is I was hanging out with a friend. It was actually a old neighbor of yours that we were all friends with, and we rented Jason Goes to Hell. And we were a little older. We were like in 5th grade. I want to say 5th grade, maybe 6th grade. But that one has a pretty heavy-duty sex scene.
Yeah, it does.
And it's like a sex scene that it ends in spectacular violence. And that one, my mom was like, okay, I've definitely crossed a bridge. Because, like, it wasn't just me. It was, like, me and then, like, another kid she was responsible for. Yeah. So it was like, then she was like, well, let's shut this one down. So yeah, that definitely happened. But from that period, like, I just never gave up on the stuff. Like, I love horror movies. I studied movies in college and stuff like that, and then I discovered like the Italian stuff and just kind of got lost in it. I love the genre. I couldn't really tell you why, like aside from like several, I mean, I love the feeling of suspense. I love the visual representation of it in a film. Like I love long, like Hitchcockian, like hallway shots, things where we were just actually, have you seen The Curse? Okay, Curse is really, really good. It's not a horror thing at all. It's like, it's Nathan Fielder.
I feel like you're tricking me.
No, it's really not a horror movie at all. But I'll let me explain. It's with Nathan Fielder and Emma Stone. It's really, really good. It reminds me a lot of Twin Peaks in a lot of ways. But a thing that it has in common with Twin Peaks, in my opinion, is that they'll do this stuff visually. Like, for example, in The Curse, there's like a scene, like one of the main characters, he drives people around in his car, and he has this like backstory where like he got drunk and he killed his wife in a DUI type thing. And so like he'll like be driving with someone and he makes this face, and the music scored in a certain way where you think he's gonna like maybe this is what he does. Like he kills people by like driving them. But like, so they build up this tension, and then it ends in him being like, well, I am a little too drunk, so let's just stop this car and we'll walk the rest of the way. And like that ride, that journey of it doesn't end in a payoff like horror movies usually do, but just that tension is something about it that like I love, and I keep like a moth to flame. Sure. And that tension is, I mean, this is a passive. What I'm talking about is passive. With video games, you interact with that tension. And boy, oh boy, do I love it.
Okay, so I kind of already know the answer to this because you described the wonderful story of you playing Resident Evil 8 in VR and being terrified by that.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you? I'll just limit it to movies. Are you still at the point with movies where a movie can actually scare you?
Yes, absolutely. There's so pretty recently I watched Barbarian. Came out a couple years ago. Was done by the director was one of the members of a sketch comedy troupe called The Whitest Kids You Know. And it's funny, like horror and comedy, there's so much in common. Like they're both very rhythmic. It's all about timing. So like with comedy, it's all about getting the timing right on a joke so that it lands just right for maximum effect. Yeah. Horror is the exact same thing. It's all about lining things up to elicit the response that they're going for, and you achieve it with timing. So like Jordan Peele is a perfect example. Like his movies are great. Like I think Jordan Peele's movies are fantastic, and he's a super funny comedian. So like he has an innate ability to play with timing and do it really, really well. So he's really good at comedy. He's really good at horror. And I think that this other guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy who directed Barbarian, same deal. And I saw that movie in the theater, and there was several times where like I was like, and I watched that movie by myself, which I love watching horror movies in the theater by myself because it adds to it. Now you're in like a big dark room with random ass people, so it kind of gets you a little bit more in the mood to feed on that tension and the stress. But yeah, that movie, it's even though it wasn't, there's a little campiness to it, but very little. It was overall very mean-spirited, and that's what I loved about it, and it did genuinely scare me. And there's a lot of elements of Jordan Peele's, I'm talking about newer stuff, a lot of elements of Jordan Peele's movies that can at least lay that layer of tension in a if they don't outright terrify me, they play with tension very, very effectively.
I watched the first Jordan Peele movie. I can't remember.
Get Out?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I saw that. I have not seen all the other movies.
Us. So there's Us and Nope.
So Us, I think Get Out is, it's almost like a thriller more than, it's not like a pure horror movie.
Yes. Yeah.
But then I've been told that no, that Get Out is like that, but that Us is more like a pure horror movie.
Yeah, Us is definitely more horror than thriller for sure.
I just
people. So to me, I put thriller and horror in the same thing. Like Silence of the Lambs is technically a thriller.
Yes,
but like it to me it plays the same strings. Like it's like to me it's the difference between a baritone guitar and a guitar. They're both fucking guitars.
I could see it as a spectrum. Yeah. But the reason I could see it as a spectrum is because I can watch thriller movies, but I have a real tough time with horror movies, Brian. I just do.
And you always have, and it's precious, and we're definitely going to talk about that. But I think for me, it's a coexistence. I think thriller and horror is kind of the same thing for me. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying for me they are.
So you just said you could still get scared in movies,
yeah,
and that means that in this Barbarian movie, there's a moment something happens. And then you're like,
there's several moments where
you're like, ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and to be so, I think I am maybe at this point in the game immune to like traditional dread, whatever you want to say, like because I've watched some tremendously fucked up movies, so there is definitely some desensitization there.
Yeah.
I think no one is immune from a really well crafted jump scare.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and there is a difference. So like I am nowhere immune to jumping out of my seat when something like that happens, but I might be a little desensitized to like overall mean-spiritedness of violent horror movies.
I completely agree. And as two people who basically grew up with the early Wild Wild West days of the internet together, where somebody was saying, here's a video of some cute kittens and it's somebody being beheaded or whatever.
Right.
It's like there's a certain amount of desensitization that I've experienced as well.
I was just talking about that, about how messed up it was to be on the internet in the 90s and early 2000s with things like Rotten.com. And before that, you go into like Faces of Death. Faces of Death, I think even when I saw that as like a kid, and I wasn't like a young kid when I saw Faces of Death, but I was like a young teenager. I saw through the bullshit pretty quick. Like there's real shit on those. Yeah, for sure.
There's real,
and then there's the ones that are very clearly like produced and made up. And
I watched it. So I watched it for the first time when I was a teenager, and then all of it was seared into my head.
Yeah.
So that 15 years later, when Wikipedia came out, and I went back and looked at which scenes were real and which ones were fake, I was like, damn it.
You maybe
could have saved me some trauma if I had known that it's not actually real.
Monkey Brains is fake. Yeah, that's pretty solid.
So anyway, but I watched it. So I am somewhat desensitized to the gore aspects of it.
Yeah.
But the jump scare, that really is sort of universal. And to this day, I am very susceptible, as you've been present for many times.
I've caught that body when needed to.
For a good jump scare. And when it happens, it sucks. So my thing to you is, if you're watching a movie and there's a good jump scare and you get and you jump, that is an unpleasant feeling.
Yeah, but so is riding roller coasters. Like for me, it's the same thing. Like a roller coaster, like the fear that you feel, like the terror, and it's all like what's it called, subconscious. Like if you're going down that sweet ass first drop on Viper, one of the best coasters of all time. Like no matter if you've ridden that ride like 90 times, like you still feel like, oh shit, I'm gonna die. Like your brain, there's something in your brain that's telling you, like that's why those rides are fun, is because like you're safely playing with like your body's reaction to like, oh shit, I'm gonna die. And I think jump scares are the same thing. It's like playing with that part of your body, like the subconscious of your brain. It's like a fight or flight type of a mechanism, and you're playing with it.
The thing about the jump scare is that when I react to it, it's an involuntary reaction.
Yeah.
You're doing a thing, and it's awful. With a roller coaster, there's a psychological component too, because you're going up and you're sort of in your own head, and then you're going down. But it's not so immediate. It doesn't feel involuntary to me. It's like there is an apprehension, a tension, an anxiety. There's all of that, but those are more low level emotions than just like and just an adrenaline burst.
Yeah, but then there's also like for me, there's ineffective jump scares. There's like telegraph jump scares where like full well that like, and I know it's probably for people who are more versed in the genre, it's easier to spot, but like there's certainly like bad horror movies that like when you know there's all this negative space, so the character in the foreground will be like on one side of the frame, and then you have all this negative space on the other side. Like something's gonna jump up there, and like the ones that do it poorly,
the close-ups.
And there's horror movies that are bad that do that stuff poorly, and it's all telegraphed, and so like that's different. But when it's done right and when it's done well, and you really don't expect them, that's when it's good. And even better than that is the ones where they trick you. Where like, and I think Jordan Peele did this a lot in Nope, which I think is a really good movie. He telegraphs to where like you think the jump scare is going to happen, and then it's like, oh, okay, it didn't happen there, and then like, bam, it gets you again. Like because there was actually it was a red herring to the actual jump scare, and that's probably my favorite. Because it hurts more.
Oh, Brian, I never want to hear you tease me about completing video games I hate ever again.
Yeah, well, we're all weird in our own different ways. But like, I don't know. So I am a huge fan of horror stuff, and so naturally I'm a huge fan of horror video games.
Yeah.
So do you want to dive into this box, or is there anything else you want to say about the genre?
I want the genre of horror video games. I just want to say a couple things.
Okay.
One is I told the story before, but since it's episode appropriate now, I tried to give it a go with horror games. I played Outlast, and
you played all of Alien Isolation.
Okay, I did. Well, see, here's the thing: if a game is highly rated enough, and that game was excellent, we did an entire episode on that, on how good that game was.
We both love that game,
and then I will force myself through it just because I hate missing out on something that everybody else.
And you're kind of doing that right now with Alan Wake 2.
Absolutely,
right?
And it sucks. Alan Wake 2 is terrifying. Alan Wake 1 was terrifying. But I'm doing it because it was the game of the year and there's all this stuff. And it's like, okay, I'm having a miserable time, but I'm friggin' doing it. And we'll probably talk about it on a future episode. But if I can help it, I will stay away from those games. And Outlast was not like a game of the year contender. So the first time I had a jump scare in that, which happened pretty early on, I just said, look, I just don't need this in my life.
Yeah.
There's other stuff out there. I'll go play Life is Strange.
I do. That's what a perfect pull on that. I do. So I understand that entirely, by the way. Like I get not wanting to put your body through that kind of stress. And we talked a little bit about this on our a ways back on an RTS episode. And that's so it's let's talk about stress and under the umbrella of stress. So in game design, there's good stress. There's the types that developers exploit. So in horror, the exploitation of stress is resource management, and it's the same type of thing that's in RTSs, but it's a different side of that coin. So in RTSs, like the reason why I don't like them is that level of stress of like constantly having like this moving time target. I'm like, I'm not doing things fast enough. I'm not doing things.
Yeah.
I'm not making the right decisions quickly enough, and all that. Once those add up and add up and add up, like I don't need that in my life, just like you. With horror,
it's a good comp.
So, like I totally understand why you or anyone else wouldn't want to invite that stuff into their life in the same way that I don't want to invite that time pressure shit from RTSs into my life.
Right. I think that's very correct. And I'm trying to think of like if I watched any horror movies out after you get done with your Jasons and your Freddys as a kid.
The slasher phase.
I watched The Ring when that was kind of a big deal. And I was living in Sweden by myself at the time, and that terrorized me pretty good. And other than that, I think I've mostly been out.
There's a grouping of movies, and I might be butchering what's like the fan label of them, but it's the French Nouveau of horror. And again, that's the part that I'm probably ruining. But if you look, so there's them. There's oh god, what's it? Baiser-Moi is technically a part of this. That's more of like that movie's shocking as fuck. But them is really, really good. Is it Messiahs? Or it starts with M, and it's a one-word son of a bitchin' thing. Anyway, the point is, if you're into horror, you probably know what I'm talking about. But these are movies that were released in the past 10 years. I remember we were texting about horror stuff a long time ago, and you went and looked up trailers to these movies, and you were like, "There's no way. There's literally no way I could watch these." And those movies, for me, as someone who's loved horror movies for years and years and years, they're really hard to watch. Like they're so fucked up and terrifying and like really, really well done. And in terms of building up that stress, oh my God.
Oh, yeah. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that did a number on
best.
me.
That movie's the best. And when you think about how effective that movie is, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, by the way, like, and I'm not at all alone in saying what I'm about to say, but that is considered one of the absolute best American-made movies of all time because of how effective it is at what it does. If you think about that movie and all the tension that's in it and the way it's shot and all the strategery of the way that the cameras are placed and how it's made, like, all of the negatives about it are positive. So that, first of all, that movie was shot on 16 millimeters, so it has this really gritty, almost real feel to it.
Found footage.
Exact found footage. And they promote the movie as found footage. And there's an opening splash screen that talks about how this was found. So like there's world building around the movie, not even in the movie itself, that makes you think that this is going to be a fucked up experience. And then when you watch it, you have this idea in your mind of like all these horrible things that are happening, and they are happening, but you don't see any of it. Like, there's no violence that you actually see in that movie. Like, yeah, you do see like the camera pan and you'll see some blood splash on someone, but you never see Leatherface actually cut someone in half. Or in the sequels, the terrible, terrible sequels to that movie, you see all that stuff, and it's worse off for it. But it's the same thing as like Alien. Like, the original Alien is all about like making you think you're seeing things that you're actually not thinking, and it's filmmaking, like, it's expert stuff. Like, that is like really. And I'll go toe-to-toe on any film snob on this shit. Like, I think when horror movies are done well, like in terms of like the technical aspects of eliciting emotions out of people, there's a like that horror is the tippy top genre.
It really. So I actually agree with you on this because it's a very specialized emotion that you're trying to get out of people, and it's not the easiest thing in the world, especially adults.
Yes.
Because you get desensitized to the world. Most people don't believe in ghosts and all this other stuff by the time you become an adult, and yet you're watching a movie and you have to be immersed enough in the movie to feel that when there is that cut that happens.
Right.
That gives you the scare. So I do think it's not an easy trick to pull off.
Yeah, and when it's done really well, it commands respect. God damn it. But yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's a game that's out right now.
Yeah.
On Xbox that I desperately want to play with people, but no one's playing it.
I'm not going to be one of them.
I know. Danny and I played it, and we had a really, really good time.
I bet you did.
But no one's playing the game now, so it's like it's
on.
Well, and it's on no one plays games on Xbox, baby. That's kind of the problem. Yeah. That's kind of one of many problems that we've touched on. So anyway, let's get into this box.
All right.
Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna pull out a couple games that I quite literally just want to brag that I own, and then I'm gonna hand you this treasure trove.
Okay.
Pull out some games, and we can rapid fire discuss them. You don't have to pull out all of the games that are in here because there's a shit ton.
The game's gonna scare me, Brian.
You pulling them out. Ow! Just Ned Flanders the whole time. So okay, here's one that's very special to me. This is
I knew
that's Clock Tower.
I thought this was coming.
That's Clock Tower for the Wonder Swan, pal.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, exactly. I own it. So this game, Clock Tower, on WonderSwan is a black and white version of this game, which is Clock Tower for the Super Famicom.
Now, is this not the game that features the show mascot? What's his name?
Steve. Yeah, that's Clock Tower 3, which is in the same world, but Capcom bought Clock Tower, the property, off of Human Entertainment, makers of Fire Pro fucking Wrestling, Jack. But Clock Tower is very special because it is kind of like, for console, it was the first one, really. Like, you have Sweet Home on the NES, which was made by Shinji Mikami, who would go on to make the Resident Evil series. But, like, this game is really where it very effectively kind of went after what horror movies were going for. And it is, like, kind of an egregious ripoff of a... Jesus, with this fucking throat. Not cutting this. Not cutting it.
Good content.
It's good content. It's for the people. It's for the fans. But there's a Dario Argento movie called Phenomena, which is like basically this. It's like almost the same storyline. But hey, like horror movies, they rip each other off a lot. That's kind of part of the deal.
Yeah, I know. Does Capcom still own Clock Tower?
Yes, and nothing's happened. So the guy who made Clock Tower, and this is a recommendation to all my sickos out there. The guy who made Clock Tower, the name escapes me, he did do a Kickstarter funded game called Night Cry, and it is every bit a true Clock Tower sequel, even down to like the character looks like Scissor Man. He has a big thing of scissors. It's pretty low budget because it was low budget. It's on Steam and it came out on Vita of all things. But I loved it. If you like Clock Tower, which Clock Tower is a point and click adventure game. That's what it is, but it's horror. And there still has the same like stress, and you're being constantly chased by a marauding killer, which kind of makes the point and click thing effective because you don't get to run away super fast, which adds to it. But yeah, Night Cry I recommend it if you like Clock Tower. And then the other two that I'm going to show off here before I give it to you are some of my absolute fucking favorite games of all time. So obviously we've got Splatterhouse 3 there on the Sega Genesis.
So that's a game I could play.
Yeah, definitely. And then we got Splatterhouse 2 right there also on the Genesis. Both of these games are worth a stupid amount of money these days, and these are my original copies that will never be sold unless I'm hard up for money. But anyway, here is the box. I'm going to hand you the box. There is like, I don't know, like I want to say like maybe 30 games in here or something like that. And I picked out, these are specific. I kind of feel like Souls games are horror games, but I didn't put any of them in there.
All right.
If I were to pick any Souls game that was more horror than anything else, I would have put Bloodborne in there. So I'm going to say honorable mention, Bloodborne, I think is kind of a horror game, but I didn't put it in there. So what I picked are games that are like as true to the horror genre as you can get. So a lot of like, they're going to find a lot of Resident Evil games in there. None of the action ones.
First.
So we got the remake of Dead Space.
Which I played.
Yeah. How did you do with this one? How did you do?
Surprisingly well.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of jump scares, so it's just all ambience.
But it does have there's some there. It's there. I mean, jump scares exist in that thing.
For whatever reason, I was able to handle that game pretty well.
Okay.
I didn't have any issues with it, and I thought it was great. I mentioned it. I think it was my honorable mention when we did our Game of the Year.
Yeah, you
episode.
did put it up on your list for sure. I think this remake is excellent. Just as a remake of a good game, because the original Dead Space was good too. Dead Space 2 and 3 got a little too actiony for me. They kind of lose the horror plot a little bit.
Well, I didn't play them, and I don't know that.
I don't think they're going to get remade. I don't think this did all that well.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, and we talked about this, so we'll
Alien Isolation.
Just doing the games I'm familiar with for
Absolutely.
the moment. Oh, here's another one. I just platinum this.
That's the original. This is the 360 version of Alan Wake. So did this come out on PC back in the day? I don't remember.
Yes, it did.
It did. Okay,
definitely.
And then at that time, you just said, "Nope, I have no interest in that."
It was recommended to me, and I put it on my I want to get to it list, but then didn't, and then played it recently again because I wanted to play it in anticipation of the sequel.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought it was a thriller, not a horror game. It's more of a horror game than a thriller, I think. Yeah. And that sucked.
You know what I love about I haven't played Alan Wake 2 yet, but it's definitely on my list. But I love the tongue-in-cheek aspects of this stuff. Like I think it rides a wonderful line of being legitimately like horror, but then also has just enough levity in there.
Yeah.
to keep you going. It's just like Nightmare on Elm Street. Like there's genuinely funny parts to those movies. Like every time Freddy says bitch, I will laugh every single time.
Well, and God, by the fourth movie, it was they were Rodney Dangerfield with the one-liners.
100%. Really the star there.
So just
so Clock Tower 3, we got Steve represent. So Clock Tower 3, I think gameplay wise is really, really awesome, but it does not have the same feeling as the older Clock Tower games, in my opinion.
Okay, so
a little bit more Resident Evil on this one, I think.
Okay, so we've come to a game that I know nothing about. I'm going to ask you to explain, and I'm basing this just on the font and the title.
Got it. Okay, so this is... buddy, you picked a real winner. So this is Echo Night Beyond. I'll show the cam there. This is a sequel to a PlayStation game. Guess who made this game, friend?
Blizzard?
No. From Software.
Oh.
So From Software...
I think I've heard of them.
You may have, yeah. From Software, actually, you're going to pull out like 2 more From Software games in there. They're really, really good at making horror games. And the fact that they got to make a new Armored Core because of their success with the Souls franchise, I would love for them. There's a game in there called Kuon, if you pull it out. Buddy, that game is fantastic. It's so legitimately scary, and it's criminally hard to get. I bought that game when it first came out. Yeah, this is it. So this bad boy now, this is probably a couple $100 now, easy, because it's a Age Tech limited release.
I feel like you're just so in your wheelhouse right now.
Yeah, I am flying high again, big time. But yeah, Kuon. I cannot recommend this game enough, and I really, really wish it was easier to play today, but it's not. It's a samurai game, like old feudal Japan, scary shit. Wonderful.
All right, I got a couple more for you. Are you ready?
Lay them on me.
Okay, so this one we've talked about before. I think because I'd mentioned... Well, actually, I don't want to... Here's the game.
Deadly Premonition.
This game has come up on this show before.
It's one of my all-time favorite video games, friend, and this is the version to play, if you can. Yeah. A couple caveats with this. This game, you have to drive a lot.
This is what it is.
And it has the worst driving controls ever. But to me, it's just straight out. It's a con. Like the driving is very bad, and you probably would quit playing it. But if you love this kind of shit, man, like this is Twin Peaks, the video game, in every sense of the word. Almost too closely at times.
That sounds really fun. Twin Peaks, the video game.
It's so good.
And that's actually kind of like what Alan Wake 2 is.
You could get this game on Steam for like 99 cents all the time. So I would love for you to try this game so you could see why I love this thing so much.
When people say that, you can get this game and it's super cheap.
Yeah.
This is what I want people to say. I don't want people to talk about the price of the game anymore.
Right.
You can get this game and beat it in 8 minutes.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear now.
That's more important.
Because at this point in our lives, the wheel has turned.
Yeah,
and it's now the time investment is way more important than the money investment.
Yeah. So you're happy to pay $150 for 5 hours of rock solid gameplay.
So, you say that
no,
number,
I'm not kidding.
If Elden Ring costs $150, you would pay it, and so would I.
Yeah,
that's just where we're at.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. I don't mind if games cost more as long as they're shorter. And by the way, what a weird dynamic that is. Give me a game that's 10 minutes and then charge me double for it.
Yeah, that's called being in your fucking 40s. That's what that means.
All right, I got 2 more for you.
Okay.
Whatever this is.
So this is Trapped. Look at it. This is like if it was a new metal band, they would spell it like this. So this is you ever heard of the Deception series from Tecmo?
No.
These games you run around in these like real gnarly looking like torture dungeons, and you set traps for enemies. You don't directly fight them. You have to lure people into traps.
That sounds like a really fun mechanic.
It's awesome. And again, a series that's pretty much forgotten to time. They did a PS4 Deception game that not a whole lot of people played, so it's kind of a dormant series. Tecmo's a big horror heavy hitter, though. You'll see in there I've got many Fatal Frame games.
Yeah, I do see that. They're not the one I'm picking. All right, so this is the last one I want you to describe.
So this is the Nonary games. Friend, I think you would really genuinely like this. So it's not overly gory. There's gore, don't get me wrong, but it's actually more, and it is more thriller than it is horror. But again, my taste is that I put them under the same umbrella. But this game is kind of like Squid Game before Squid Game was a thing. Like you with random strangers, you wake up, no one knows why they got there, and you have to figure out a way to get out. And oh, by the way, people are systematically being murdered while everyone's working together to escape the situation. So Nonary Games is a collection of 2 games, 999, which came out on the Nintendo DS, and then the other one is called Zero Time Dilemma, I believe, is the part 2 of this. But these are great. Like here's why I know you're gonna like this. You love solving puzzles. You love games like Myst and Talos Principle and all that shit.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily love horror all that much, but you love old school PC adventure games.
This is all correct, yeah.
And that's what this is. But it's in a wrapper of a decent little horror story. So, and then this is another one too where it's like all day long. Some of these games I have in here are like legitimately rare and expensive as shit. This game all day long, $10, and it's really, really, really good.
And how much time?
Honestly, because you can play, it's 2 games in one, each one maybe 10 hours, and they're multiple ending ones too. So like you can die in 2 hours and be like, well, I beat it, and then move on with your life.
Well, how about the platinum trophy though? You got to do all the endings.
That doesn't. Don't need to talk about it. I'll bring up a couple more, and then we'll ride off into the blood sun here. I have more Clock Tower games. So Clock Tower. This is Clock Tower for the PlayStation, which is technically Clock Tower 2. Because the original is, of course, that Super Famicom game. This is the game that stole my heart.
Clock Tower 2?
Well, in America, we call it Clock. This is the first Clock Tower that came out here.
Okay.
The other one, Japan only. This game, I remember, so you can't understate how big of a game the original Resident Evil was on PlayStation, and it begat tons of clones. And this is one of those clones. But any game that you play today, where in a lot of like the modern remakes of Resident Evil, so 2 and 3, several other games come to mind, but there's a main character, a villain that's like constantly chasing after you, and like that's part of where the horror comes from. Is like you never know when this guy is gonna pop out, and like all of a sudden you have to stop doing what you're doing in the middle of the game and survive. You have to run away from this character. So that started here with Clock Tower. So when you see in like Resident Evil 2 remake, they have a Mr. X, who's this giant marauding like android looking thing. He's really cool looking, and he will just randomly pop in. Or Nemesis is the bigger example from Resident Evil 3 that everyone knows if you like those, if you're familiar with those very popular games. But that all came from Clock Tower. The whole idea of like there is a constant unkillable threat that at any time is going to jump out and you have to run away.
I'm starting to get stressed out just
talking about it. So
the sweat is forming.
Clock Tower rules. Clock Tower 2, which was called Clock Tower the Demon Head in Japan. This game is one of the most glorious pieces of shit ever. I love this game because I love Clock Tower. But make no mistake, this game is awful. There's a sequence where you're in like a building, you're in a hospital. And there's all these zombies, and the zombies are like really cheesy, like green-skinned zombies. The only way to kill them, is to lure them into a bathroom and bop them on the head with a push broom. There's no other way to kill them. If you don't do this every single time, you will not advance through the game. You will lose. It's really, really, really bad, but bad in a way that endears itself to me and certainly not anyone else. Although Clock Tower weirdos, we get it. We all get it. Couple more. I've talked about this game on the show before. This is Eternal Darkness for the GameCube. Did some of the honestly, some of the most innovative fourth wall breaking stuff in any video game to date still. And so Silicon Knights developed this. Silicon Knights unfortunately has a bit of a dodgy history. Dennis Dyack, there's some shady shit about him from a business standpoint.
We've talked about that on the show before, I think.
He used to be there was a point in time where Dennis Dyack was kind of like thought of as like like one of these very important minds in video games, and for whatever reason it just kind of dropped off. They tried to do it back when Kickstarter was really, making waves, so like 2012, 2013.
Yo, I remember that.
They tried to do an Eternal Darkness remake, and oh boy, did it fail miserably.
I'm surprised I didn't contribute to it. That would have been right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, throw money away at nothing. That's me. But if you can play Eternal Darkness, it's GameCube exclusive. But Dolphin is a thing. I can't recommend it enough. And it's really just for those insanity effects. Like they're still to this day so fucking cool, and nothing comes close. Let's see here. But people love and I mean love, Silent Hill. Brother, I've tried. I've tried to play these games.
This is not for you.
I don't know. So I've never been able to complete a Silent Hill. There's something
too scary, Brian.
Yeah, certainly. There's something about them to where they're a little too obtuse, like in the puzzle solving department. So my solution to that, of course, is to just look up walkthroughs. But like I admittedly got into Silent Hill a little too late to the game, I think. And a lot of fans don't like to hear that because it's really Silent Hill fans they're kooky. Like, and there's a new Silent Hill game finally coming out after like 20 years or something, and they're losing their shit over it. And God bless them. I'm happy for you. You got your game. I don't know, man. Like Silent Hill's probably the biggest, most beloved horror game franchise that I haven't yet been able to fully get into.
Yeah.
I'm not done trying though. I'll say that. I'm not done trying. This, by the way, I bought this game is worth, I don't know how much now, like a stupid amount of money, hundreds of dollars. Bought this at a video store in El Monte for $4. So chew on it, Marks.
Would you say clock? Well, no, I would bet at this point you would say Resident Evil is your favorite horror franchise.
All right, so it's a tie, and I'm going to say this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do this. So Resident Evil, yes, and this series, which I am trying to get all of mine together. I think I have all of them here. Fatal Frame. So Fatal Frame, Tecmo. You take pictures of ghosts with a magical camera that kills ghosts. The aesthetic is wonderful. Like you just travel around abandoned, like traditional Japanese homes. Yeah. So that aesthetic is great. They do some really cool psychological shit. The storylines in these they range from fucked up to incredibly fucked up in terms of like why you're dealing with the situations that you're dealing with. A lot of cult stuff. Like, in fact, I think that's kind of like a thread that ties all Fatal Frame games together, is that they always involve some sort of creepy death cult. And I got a lot of time. I got a lot of time for that shit. So Fatal Frame is tied with Resident Evil for me in terms of my favorite genres. And over the years, let's just do it all. These are all my Resident Evil games here that I have. Shout out to Code Veronica on the Dreamcast. If you know, you know. But Resident Evil started off being this like B horror movie, corny, like really corny. The original one has some of the most quotable things ever, like Barry, where's Barry? And Jill, you're the master of unlocking. Like shit like that. But they've become
I love that voice.
Yeah. Then you should play the original Resident Evil. When Resident Evil first came out, it did blow minds though. Like they took Alone in the Dark, which if I haven't mentioned yet, let me go ahead and mention Alone in the Dark for the PC is such an important horror game. Like probably without that game, you don't have Resident Evil, period. Yeah. So like it's and they're making a new Alone in the Dark. It's coming out this year, I believe. And they've tried to bring Alone in the Dark back several times and it has failed. So hopefully they get it right this time. Did you ever play Alone in the Dark? You're a fucking PC guy. That game was wasn't bigger than Myst, but it was right there. It was in the conversation. Certainly as big as Seventh Guest and 11th Hour and all that stuff.
I did play Seventh Guest. I did not play. I played some of 11th Hour. I did not play Alone in the Dark, and probably.
Do you not remember how big Alone in the Dark was at that time?
No, actually, I don't. But
it was fucking huge.
Okay.
It was a really, really popular PC game.
Yeah.
So, and I'll say this about Resident Evil: the down period starts after 4, so there's 5 and 6. I have not even played those games because they're so much more like action-oriented games than they are horror. I don't know that I'm ever going to get around to playing them because like it's kind of why bother? Yeah. It's missing the mark of what I like about Resident Evil. But all of these remakes, so we're talking Resident Evil 2 and 3, 4, and then not remakes, but 7 and Village.
Yeah.
They are as good as horror games can get, in my opinion. They are so fucking good, and you probably couldn't stand a second of them, especially 7. 7 really emulates Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all the reasons that I was talking about before.
I can't. Even thinking about it.
Yeah, there's no way you could play 7, but I wish you could because it's a fantastic game. And then 4 and 8 in VR, as I've said on the show before, it's some of my absolute favorite gaming experiences that I've ever had. So. And to see Resident Evil, so there was a period where there was a lot of talk, a lot of chatter about Capcom being bought by Microsoft because like they were hurting so bad. And the two things that saved Capcom, and I fucking love them both dearly, is Monster Hunter and Resident Evil.
And now they're flying high.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Street Fighter, of course, it helps. Street Fighter is pretty important as well.
Time for a new Clock Tower game, Brian. It's out there.
Oh, brother, don't you? So they did a Way Forward, who I don't know if they do really, really good work. They were going to remake the original Clock Tower. The Super Famicom one is supposed to come out, and they did a trailer for it. It was on one of the Nintendo Directs a long time ago, and it's been radio silence on that shit ever since, which hurts my heart because you don't fucking tease any new Clock Tower thing. Like the Silent Hill creeps being what they are, like us Clock Tower perverts will beat the shit out of you in terms of overall weirdness. Yeah. So yeah, and then let's see any other ones I want to mention. Oh, I'll close out on this one because I don't think a lot of people are playing this one. And this is a very cheap game, but it's Tormented Souls for the PS5 and I think Series X as well. Very, very traditional survival horror, like tank controls, limited resources. Like they're not pre-rendered backgrounds, but they look like that, like the fixed camera angle view of Alone in the Dark and Resident Evil. That's what this game does. Pretty shocking scenes of violence and a lot of body horror is in here as well. So body horror, if you're not familiar, is like the stuff that what's his face? Videodrome and Scanners and The Fly. Why can't I think? David Cronenberg. David Cronenberg is real famous for doing body horror shit. And that's the end of this show because all three cameras are dead. So thanks for watching. I'm sure at this point I've put up a makeshift graphic that says technical difficulties. This has been a bit of a cursed session, but we'll leave it here. Horror games, I love them. I hope, Robbie, I've educated you enough.
You have. Yeah.
And in the meantime, when we come back, hopefully we have better.
Like and subscribe so we can get some new cameras.
Yeah, please and thank you. Please and thank you, so we don't have to deal with this horrific, speaking of horror, horrific ordeal. So tune in next time for more Midlife Krisis.